UN envoy Hans Grunberg discusses with Foreign Minister Ahmed Mubarak the situation in Abdiya. France calls on Houthi rebels to stop military escalation and indulge in political talks at once. Houthi rebels shell civilian areas in Hodeidah, violating Stockholm peace agreement. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbay. Foreign Minister Ahmed Mubarak informed the United Nations envoy Hans Grunberg of the terrible situation in Abdiya. The Yemeni minister called on the United Nations and the international community to assume their responsibilities and urgently interfere to save civilians. Mubarak added that the international community must force the Houthis into ending violence and to engage in a serious peace process. On his part, the UN envoy stressed the importance of ending the violence and start a comprehensive political process that would end war and human suffering. The French embassy in Yemen called on Houthi militia to abandon the military option and to reach for a ceasefire. The French embassy confirmed the security situation in Yemen continues deteriorating, calling on Houthis to abandon the military option for a comprehensive ceasefire. Yesterday, the United States condemned the Houthi escalation on Ma'rib fronts. Rights Radar has condemned the kidnappings and enforced disappearance of the people in Abdiya. The organization confirmed that the Houthis launched raids and burned homes of civilians. The human rights organization also condemned the kidnappings and enforced disappearance, calling on the UN envoy to Yemen to interfere urgently to ensure the opening of safe corridors for the people of Abdiya. The press quoted that the United Nations aid workers saying that Houthis prevented humanitarian aid from reaching Abdiya. The UN workers said Houthis restricted movement in district for 3 weeks, adding thousands of people were displaced amid indiscriminate shelling and missile attacks. UN workers added that Houthis' blockade also prevented the transfer of wounded and sick people. In Ma'rib, the Associated Press confirmed the killing of civilians, including women and children, and Houthi attacks using missiles and drones. The executive unit managing the internally displacement camps in Ma'rib accused the international organizations of not responding to distress calls launched since September. The unit highlighted the international organizations did not assume their duties towards the humanitarian situation in Abdiya. The unit warned against a major humanitarian catastrophe in the future due to the deteriorating humanitarian situation and the new waves of displacement. Houthi escalation in Ma'rib and other fronts of Yemen requires the international community to act urgently to stop the ongoing violence. More on the story is within this report.
The new United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, told the Security Council in his last briefing that urgent political talks without preconditions are essential to negotiate a settlement for the conflict in Yemen. Grunberg's briefing may shed light on the main problem in Yemen that centers on the wide gap of trust. The trustless atmosphere in Yemen may have been originated from the Houthi unjust practices against the whole country and from their political and racial agenda, with which they try to transform Yemen into a new Imam state, supported in this regard by their Iranian ally. This fact is clear, with Houthi refusal to apply any of the compromises they have reached to solve the crisis. Yemeni head of Senate Ahmed bin Dagr accused the rebels of failing to support the United Nations attempt to reach for a just and comprehensive peace. According to bin Dagr, Houthi refused to endorse the Kuwaiti document they agreed upon that included military, security and economic understandings. He added that Houthis hold up the Stockholm Agreement and benefited from the international lax stance. Bin Dagr added that the rebels are being steered from Iran, which looks to the Yemeni crisis as a pressure tool in their own nuclear crisis with the West. As to him, the solution in Yemen must stick to a comprehensive ceasefire, a national dialogue, and a national conciliation, describing this regard as the United Nations rule as underplayed. The statements by the United Nations envoy and the Yemeni head of Senate coincides with the ruthless Houthi offensive on Ma'rib and a stifling blockade on Abdiyah that end at the time being any hope for peace revival. Rising up the tone of fighting from the part of the Houthis may force Yemenis for more resistance and solidarity to restore their country. Resistance and resistance only may be the sole way for salvation out of the crisis in Yemen.
The Houthi militia renewed their shelling on populated areas in Hais, south of Hodeidah. In the same line, a number of Houthi militia were killed and others injured. Media sources reported the movements of the militia were spotted south of the city and the joint forces fired on them. Media sources documented the killing and wounding of about 20 civilians in 7 governorates this month as a result of Houthi mines. The statistics of UN reports indicated that the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Yemen revealed that mines since 2018 have killed nearly 1,424 civilians. Houthi militia has been interfering with everything, even religious occasions, which they turned into a chance to steal people's money. This comes at a time in which the religious occasion of the Prophet's birth should be a reminder for the world of the morals of the Prophet. More on the story is within this report.
Since the coup against the state on September 2014, the Houthi militia has been tampering with everything, even religious occasions, which they turned into seasons to steal citizens' money. The anniversary of the Prophet's birthday has turned, like other occasions, into a season for the theft of people's money by the Houthi militia. And whoever does not respond to it is accused of not loving the messenger of God, and they start using force with him, which made this occasion turn into a heavy burden on the shoulders of the citizens and merchants in their area of control. Their arrogance reached the point of forcing the people of the countryside to pay sums of money in the name of supporting the Prophet's birthday. Also, shop owners and citizens are helpless and have nothing to do with the arrogance of the Houthis. They found themselves compelled to pay royalties by force of arms. Houthi militia distributed circulars to shop owners asking them to pay sums of money and buy the militia's green cloth and hang it in front of their shops, as well as paint storefronts in green. They gave merchants and citizens a deadline to pay the money and carry out the directions, or else they would use force with them. Adding to their crimes, Houthi militia expelled the displaced from Hodeidah from Al-Mahawit Stadium with the aim of holding their celebration for the Prophet's birthday. Also, school radios have turned into a platform for forcibly imposing Houthi ideas on students by allocating school radios to celebrate the Prophet's birthday, which is exploited to promote Houthi ideas and link compliance with the militia's orders to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet according to their claim. The militia recently imposed levies and royalties on hundreds of public and private schools in Ib under the pretext of supporting the Prophet's birthday, and threatened schools that failed to pay with severe penalties. They also threatened students who are not obligated to pay to throw their files from the schools in which they receive education. At a time when this great religious occasion is supposed to remind the world of the morals and the virtues of the Prophet Muhammad, instead this occasion is used to raise funds, which have become a burden on the shoulders of the Yemeni citizen, in addition to the effects of war, siege, and interruption of salaries and services. Several questions are running through minds of Yemenis and hope that they will have answers one day. Will the extravagance in the celebration satisfy the people of their hunger? Do the glamour and decorating the streets revive the faith of Muslims? And most importantly, how do Houthis celebrate the birth of the Prophet amid rivers of blood which they caused and which are against the principles of Islam in the first place?
Coming next. High price of bread aggravates people's suffering in Aden.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف، والكيس الدقيق ب18 ألف، والكيس السكر اليوم ب20 ألف. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل بكيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلى الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما أخرج لما ندي إحنا شلقيرة ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما إحنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. Yemeni students studying in Egypt continue their sit-in. The students asked the government to sack and put into accountability those responsible for their hardships. They also demanded to extend the duration of their scholarship to pay the period of coronavirus.
We came to study on scholarship grants from the Yemeni Ministry of Education. It's none of our business if the Saudi program pays our grants. They keep saying finance is not available, yet the Yemeni government should be responsible of this and should provide the right solutions. We have not received any of our remaining fees since the beginning of this year. The situation here is really bad. We are international students and we have nothing to eat, and we suffer seriously in all aspects of life. Enough is enough.
Yemeni students abroad are facing many hardships that affect their educational achievements. More on the story is within this report.
The Yemeni authorities allocate $13 million every 3 months for students on scholarships in 32 countries around the world. A bachelor's student receives $1,800 every 3 months, compared to $2,100 for a master's or a PhD student. The allowances for Yemeni students were not delayed more than a week or two until 2014, according to the documentation of the investigation prepared by reviewing remittance data issued by the Yemeni Ministry of Finance. However, since mid-2015, the delays gradually increased, reaching 1 month and then up to 6 months in 2017. The General Union of Yemeni Students Abroad intends to launch a new phase of open sit-ins in protest against the Ministry of Higher Education's irregularity in dispersing students' financial dues. This comes as a protest against the irregularity of the Ministry of Higher Education in the legitimate government in dispersing financial dues to students over the past 5 years and its impact on the progress of their educational process. Yemeni students sent to study in Egypt launched an open sit-in at the Yemeni Cultural Attaché in Cairo. During their sit-in, the students accused the student unions of slackening in their role because of the partisan loyalties of the minister, they said. They called on all Yemeni students on scholarships abroad to move towards embassies and cultural attachés and to launch open sit-ins early next week until the leadership of the Ministry of Higher Education is dismissed and held accountable, and competent people are appointed who are able to take responsibility and propose appropriate solutions for the regular payment of their dues. Students suffer from double disadvantage: the continuous delay in the arrival of living allowances, as well as the interruption of university fees for 204 male and female students, who are threatened with expulsion due to the late arrival of fees from their countries. That's to say, about a third of the scholarships in Jordan. The Jordanian government is funding the studies of 383 Yemeni students under the Cultural Exchange Protocol. What students fear most is the expulsion from university housing or from rented homes due to the delay in the quarterly living allowances every 3 months. If they do not receive subsidies to pay the rent when they cannot go back to university housing, where do these students go? To the street?
The Yemeni government approved a package of urgent measures to stop the decline of the national currency. The measures include a temporary suspension of transfers through internal financial networks and a strict application of the money exchange law. In addition, regulate the demand for hard currency, as well as tightening procedures at outlets to prevent the trafficking of foreign currency. People's inability to buy bread in Aden foretells a major crisis. Bread current price reached 50 Yemeni riyals. More on the story is within this report.
In Aden, the owners of bakeries and ovens were waiting. Perhaps it would bring something new with regard to improving economic conditions and stabilizing the national currency. But these were hopes and dreams from which nothing came true, from the magnitude of the suffering and the burden of the citizen.
Now 2 rotis cost 100 riyals. Everything is expensive. 1 yogurt equals 300 riyals. What can we do about it? We call on authorities to decrease the value of the currency, and they should have a monitoring system on shops and traders. The price differ from one place to another.
Unbearable high prices, especially this year. When we come to argue with bakery owners, they say they buy things at high prices. So we call on the government to hold traders accountable for this, or to impose a stable, even price for all goods, so that traders cannot clash with citizens. We also call on the government to impose security and stability and pay salaries. People are having hard times. Now, I buy bread that is not enough for my family. So what about those large families? My salary is 25,000 riyal. I can buy nothing with it.
New pricing and suffering that is the most harmful to citizens. Owners of bakeries and ovens attribute their reasons to the increase in food and wheat flour prices.
We, the owners of bakeries, suffer from the severe increase in prices of flour, oil, yeast, plastic bags, wood and everything else. The citizen accuses us of raising the prices of roti. However, they should be aware that we are not the reason behind this rise in prices.
Many reasons cast a shadow over the life and livelihood of the simple citizen, to live his life between the suffering of waiting and the bitterness of living, who lacks the most basic necessities of life, including a loaf of bread.
There are many different reasons that led to this disastrous situation, and it is not going to be easy to fix it through some decisions or specific steps. The country needs peace, a process of development and reconstruction, and a lot of other basics that were destroyed after 7 years of war, devastation and destruction.
This is how citizens live in Aden and other Yemeni governorates, bearing the concerns of their lives and the suffering of their livelihood, which is exacerbated day after day by the rise in food and fuel prices, and the value of the Yemeni riyal has fallen to its lowest levels against foreign currencies.
The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 30 new cases of the COVID-19 in 7 governorates. Also, 3 deaths were recorded plus 30 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,556, including 1,807 deaths and 6,084 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. UN envoy Hans Grunberg discusses with Foreign Minister Ahmed Mubarak the situation in Abdiya. France calls on Houthi rebels to stop military escalation and indulge in political talks at once. Houthi rebels shell civilian areas in Hodeidah, violating Stockholm peace agreement. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.